Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this week's Read Aloud. I'm going to read to you Shitty First Drafts, which is written by Lamott, and this is going to be my first full attempt at learning how to present from the screen. So it might be a little glitchy, and I appreciate you trying with me. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click the presenting, which is going to make me do that. Ooh, freaky. And I wanted to come over here and show you the copy of the book, Bird by Bird, written by Lamott. This was a book that Lamott wrote about writing. Her father was a very famous writer, and she became a famous writer. And she got the title of the book from something that her brother had to write when he was a student. It was a report about birds, and he was kind of freaking out, and his dad told him, "Kid, just write it bird by bird, do it bird by bird." Of course, the kid had left it till the last minute, so what he ended up doing was creating a shitty first draft. And that's actually the excerpt that you have. It's an excerpt of this chapter that Lamott wrote called Shitty First Drafts. And there's a copy of it here, but I'm not going to have you read the whole chapter. So what I've actually done is I've also given you a link on the Google form to the an online version of the excerpt. And this excerpt has also the 3 questions at the bottom that you are going to be asked to answer on the Google form. So I'm going to go ahead and read those questions to you so you kind of have in mind what you're listening for. You can follow along and read as you listen as well. And then you can go back and answer those questions. So the first question that you're listening for is, Lamott says that the perceptions most people have of how writers work is different from the reality of the work itself. She refers to this in paragraph 1 as the fantasy of the uninitiated. What does she mean? And number 2, let me see. Well, I was going to see if there's a way that I could make the screen bigger so that you could see. There we go. So you could see the questions a little better on the screen. Look at me go. Right there. There are the questions. In paragraph 7, Lamott refers to a time when, through experience, she eventually let herself trust the process, sort of, more or less. And she is referring to the writing process, of course. But why more or less? Do you think that her wariness is personal, or is she speaking for all writers in this regard? And it asks you to explain. The last question is, from what Lamott has to say, is writing a first draft more about the product or the process? And do you agree in regard to your own first drafts? Explain. I just want to remind you, for those of you that get modifications, and you know who you are, if you're not sure, you can always email me and ask, or send me a private class comment and ask. But for those of you who get modifications, you can pick any one of those 3 questions to answer and submit. Okay? And again, if you're not sure if that's you, you can email me and ask. So let's go ahead and read this excerpt. I love Lamott. She has a really good sense of humor. You'll pick up on that. It's a rather dark sense of humor. So it's okay to laugh at some of the things that she says. And after I finish reading this, you can go back and answer those questions. All right. Now, practically even better news than that of short assignments is the idea of shitty first drafts. All good writers write them. This is how they end up with good second drafts and terrific third drafts. People tend to look at successful writers who are getting their books published and maybe even doing well financially, and think that they sit down at their desks every morning feeling like $1 million, feeling great about who they are and how much talent they have and what great story they have to tell, that they take in a few deep breaths, push back their sleeves, roll their necks a few times to get all the cricks out, and dive in, typing fully formed passages as fast as a court reporter. But this is just the fantasy of the uninitiated, meaning that This is what people think when they haven't written before. I know some very good writers, writers you love who write beautifully and who have made a great deal of money, and not one of them sits down routinely feeling widely enthusiastic and confident. Not one of them writes elegant first drafts. All right, one of them does, but we do not like her very much. We do not think she has a very rich inner life, or that God likes her or can even stand her. Although when I mentioned this to my priest friend Tom, he said you can safely assume you've created God in your image when it turns out that God hates all the same people that you do. Insert laughter here. Very few writers really know what they are doing until they've done it, nor do they go about their business feeling dewy and thrilled. They do not type a few stiff warm-up sentences and then find themselves bounding along like huskies across the snow. One writer I know tells me that he sits down every morning and says to himself nicely, "It's not like you don't have a choice, because you do. You can either type or kill yourself." We all often feel like we are pulling teeth, even those writers whose prose ends up being the most natural and fluid. The right words and sentences just do not come pouring out like ticker tape most of the time. Now, Muriel Spark is said to have felt that she was taking dictation from God every morning, sitting there, one supposes, plugged into a dictaphone, typing away, humming. But this is a very hostile and aggressive position. One might hope for bad things to rain down on a person like this. Side note, as I said, she has a very dark sense of humor. For me, and most of the other writers I know, writing is not rapturous. In fact, the only way I can get anything written at all is to write really, really shitty first drafts. The first draft is the child's draft, where you let it all pour out and then let it romp all over the place, knowing that no one is going to see it and that you can shape it later. You just let this childlike part of you channel whatever voices and visions come through onto the page. If one of the characters wants to say, "Well, so what, Mr. Poopy Pants?" you let her. No one is going to see it. If the kid wants to get into really sentimental, weepy, emotional territory, you let him. Just get it all down on paper, because there may be something great and those 6 crazy pages that you would never have gotten to by more rational grown-up means. There may be something in the very last line of the very last paragraph on page 6 that you just love, that is so beautiful or wild that you now know what you're supposed to be writing about, more or less, or in what direction you might go. But there was no way to get to this without first getting through the first 5.5 pages. I used to write food reviews for California Magazine before it folded. My writing food reviews had nothing to do with the magazine folding, although every single review did cause a couple of canceled subscriptions. Some readers took umbrage. They didn't like my comparing mounds of vegetable puree with various ex-presidents' brains. Anyway, these reviews always took 2 days to write. First, I'd go to a restaurant several times with a few opinionated, articulated friends in tow. I'd sit there writing down everything anyone said that was at all interesting and funny. Then on the following Monday, I'd sit down at my desk and with my notes and try to write the review. Even after I'd been doing this for a few years, panic would set in. I'd try to write a lead, but instead I'd write a couple of dreadful sentences, X them out, X out everything, and then feel despair and worry settle on my chest like an X-ray apron. "It's over," I'd think calmly. "I'm not going to be able to get the magic to work this time. I'm ruined. I'm through. I'm toast." Maybe I'd think I can get my old job back as a clerk typist, but probably not. I'd get up and study my teeth in the mirror for a while. Then I'd stop, remember to breathe, make a few phone calls, hit the kitchen and chow down. Eventually I'd go back, sit down at my desk, and sigh for the next 10 minutes. Finally, I would pick up my 1-inch picture frame, stare into it as if for the answer, and every time the answer would come, all I had to do was write a really shitty first draft of, say, the opening paragraph, and no one was going to see it. So I'd start writing without reining myself in. I was almost just typing, just making my finger move, and the writing would be terrible. I'd write a lead paragraph that was a whole page, even though the entire review could only be 3 pages long. And then I'd start writing up descriptions of the food, one dish at a time, bird by bird. And the critics would be sitting on my shoulders, commenting like cartoon characters. They'd be pretending to snore or rolling their eyes at my overwrought descriptions. No matter how hard I tried to tone those descriptions down, no matter how conscious I was of what a friend said to me gently in my early days of restaurant reviewing, Annie, she said, it is just a piece of chicken. It is just a bit of cake. But because by then I'd been writing for so long, I would eventually let myself trust the process, sort of, more or less. I'd write a first draft that was maybe twice as long as it should be, with a self-indulgent and boring beginning, stupefying descriptions of the meal, lots of quotes from my Black-humored friends that made them sound more like the Manson girls than food lovers, and no ending to speak of. The whole thing would be so long and incoherent and hideous that for the rest of the day, I'd obsess about getting creamed by a car before I could write a decent second draft. I'd worry that people would read what I'd written and believe that the accident had really been purposeful, that I had panicked because my talent was waning and my mind was shot. The next day, I'd sit down, go through it all with a colored pen, take out everything I possibly could, find a new lead somewhere on the second page, figure out a kicky place to end it, and then write a second draft. It always turned out fine, sometimes even funny and weird and helpful. I'd go over it one more time and mail it in. Then a month later, when it was time for another review, the whole process would start again, complete with the fears that people would find my first draft before I could rewrite it. Almost all good writing begins with terrible first efforts. You need to start somewhere. Start by getting something, anything, down on paper. A friend of mine says that the first draft is the down draft. You get it down. The second draft is the up draft. You fix it up. You try to say what you have to say more accurately. And the third draft is the dental draft, where you check every tooth to see if it's loose or cramped or decayed, or even, God help us, healthy. So there you go. Now, answer the questions where you think about what she was trying to say about shitty first drafts and the writing process, and getting you connected to kind of your own writing process and recognizing that this first draft, it might be shitty, and that's okay. You're just getting it down. Next week, we're going to come back and we're going to revise it, and we're going to add, and we're going to remove, and we're going to move, and we're going to substitute until it is a much better draft, until you have fixed it up. And then we're going to post it. The best article from you, your group, is going to get posted online for everyone to see. And life is going to kind of go on as normal, as best as we can. So hopefully you're feeling really encouraged to go and do your best, and know that I'm excited to see these first drafts. Good luck. And remember, don't forget to come in at meeting times. If you have any questions or concerns, Monday, Tuesday, Thursdays, and Fridays at 9:15 to 9:45. And you can ask me any other questions via email or through class comments. Have a good one, everybody.